Hey y'all, welcome to Joyful Living. My name is Joy, and I'm so happy to have each and every one of you here. It is a new month. It is officially April, which is crazy to say. So you know what that means. And if you don't and you're new here, you'll find out. We are doing different themes every month. So I started in February, and February was all about faith. And it was all about how to live out your faith, my journey, my story, and things that can help you too. Last month was fitness. I like talking about my journey first because it gives you a taste into my life and where my advice comes from and where my tips and tricks come from. And I think it just makes for good storytelling because my life has been all over the place. So last month was fitness. And I love talking about truly the importance of being healthy in multiple areas of your life, not just fitness. This month, I have decided we are going to talk about money, or if you want to keep with the F theme, finance, right? This week, we're going to talk about my finance story, how I went from broke and overwhelmed to living alone and stable, and honestly blossoming, but we'll get there. And in the coming weeks, I have more things for you guys to chew on that will actually be beneficial to your financial journey. And my notes are over here. Just so we can stay on topic and so I'm not wasting your time, right? I don't want to waste your time. I want to make sure that all this stuff is interesting to you. So on that note, we're going to jump right in. I want to talk about finances and money. I believe very heavily that money can either empower you or it can leave you stuck. Why do I believe that, you ask? Great question. It's because I've been on both sides of those coins. I have been on the side where I literally was stressed even thinking about money, never looked at it. We can get into what that looks like, to now I see money as a tool. So I'm going to touch on that, but I'm going to dive into it. And I do want to start with my story, honestly, because you might relate. I think it's easy to see people that are successful, especially if you're in a stressful place or if you've been stuck for a while, or if you make good money, but it's not really doing what you want. Like, it's easy to get discouraged and it's easy to think that it's all it's ever going to be and money doesn't make sense. And how do I understand it? And I don't know what demographic I'm talking to. I don't know if you hate money or if you're swimming in it. Either way, I think you could gain some knowledge from what I'm going to share with you over the coming weeks. And I think it might make you feel better to hear my story, to know that it can change. It doesn't always have to be that way. So, before my relationship with money, money was stressful. It was confusing. Didn't make sense to me. I grew up very stubborn, shocker, and my parents tried to teach me about money, but I really didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to learn. I was a rebel. I thought I was cooler than everybody else, right? So I just felt like I knew better. Don't know why, because whatever. But I was out of control. Not me, but like me with money. Like, money didn't make sense to me. I would bury my head in the sand. Honestly, I avoided it. It was like the plague to me. I winged everything. I had no budget. I hated looking at my bank account. It made me stressed out. I had credit cards. I had debt. My money beliefs growing up, there's never enough. There's never enough money. Right? And money is bad and it's stressful. And, we talk a lot about your environments and what you're raised in and trauma and experience and all that stuff. And that can be related to your emotional, sorry for the dogs, that can be related to the emotional, temperature of the household. That can be related to the spiritual temperature of the household, but also your money beliefs you get from your parents. So if you had parents that were very, very diligent in saving, very, very, stable, very, very confident in their money, you had a very different upbringing than somebody whose parents always fought about money, whose parents never had enough of money, whose parents talked bad of it. In the Bible it says money is the root of all evil. But it doesn't say that, does it? That's a lie. It doesn't say that. I misspoke. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. And you even see me talking about it here, like sometimes we can get indoctrinated to believe that it's money that's evil. And so if you believe that money is bad, why am I going to hold on to something that's bad and negative, right? Even though money is not inherently bad, I believe that money magnifies who you are. So the more money that you get, the more that you can show the true colors of who you are, good or bad, right? I don't think money is bad. I think that the people wielding money make good or bad decisions. It wasn't always like that. My background, I grew up with 4 brothers. So my parents were young parents. By a little bit before 30, they had 5 kids. 29 years old, trying to feed 5 mouths and stay sane, that's hard. And I will commend my parents in so many ways. They always, always had what we needed. We never went without food. We never went without a place to live or clothing. We always had what we needed. But I hardly ever felt like I could just have what I wanted. There was never the extra. There was just enough. Or never enough. Like, we're barely making it. We're scraping by. And so that was kind of the climate, the money climate that I grew up in. And I don't blame my parents for that. I respect the heck out of them for being able to do that and feeding all 5 of us. Because as you know, if you have boys or brothers or anything like that, you know that boys are bottomless pits. No offense. You guys eat everything. Especially teenagers, growing boys. And so, it's important to note that this, it's a little bit of a sidebar what I'm talking about right now, but it so relates to the topic of money. You gain these ideas of money before you even really fully understand what it is and how it helps. My parents tried to teach us to save and put a portion, to savings, into spendings, into all that stuff. And me and my brothers really fought teaching. We really fought learning. And so as much as my parents tried, I had to do a lot of learning in my early 20s. And I was one of those people growing up. I was passionate about dance. I didn't love school, but I did it. I went to school for dance because that was the only way I felt I could graduate. And I wasn't money focused. I always said, I'm never going to get a 9-to-5. And obviously, if you don't know, I did end up eventually getting one because I was so stubborn about not wanting to work and do something I hated for money. But there's an opposite side of that spectrum where, yes, you can do what you love every day. And I did love, I was a dance teacher for a long time. I loved it. I was a waitress and that was fun and connecting with people. But the money stress is exhausting, right? So you can do what you love and rage against the machine. That was my early 20s, even into my mid 20s. I was I'm not getting a 9-to-5. But I was so miserable. And I didn't even realize how bad it was until I got out of it. And I was prideful about receiving help. So, my parents tried to teach. I didn't want to listen. I was I know more than you. I don't know why that's the case because they've been around way longer. But my money habits, credit cards. Had a lot of credit cards. I traveled the country doing color guard. I loved it, but it required a lot of money. Put a lot of money on credit cards. Had to close off more than one. Interest rates. I had no idea about interest rates, so I would just get hit with them. I ignored advice. I'm cooler than you. I know more. I know enough, or I don't want your help, right? I had no system. So I had no idea how much money was coming in every month, and I had no idea where it went. It was like a poof in the wind. Here one moment, gone the next. Every random bill would take me out. Imagine it. You have a car that you have to use to get places, and then, a tire pops. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. I have to spend X amount of $100. Or, have to get the brakes replaced. Oh my goodness, I have to get the brakes replaced. That's going to be, every single time there was a car emergency, it was code red. Because I had no savings either. We had no backup plan. No cushion, no net, no nothing. Just raw dog in life. Which is crazy to think about now. All that I know. God, I feel bad for that Joy because she was so exhausted. So, I feel the exhaustion even talking about it. Every random bill or little expense or unexpected thing would just take me out. I remember calling my dad and literally crying over car bills because it just felt unexpected, like oil changes and things like that. The result of all of these backgrounds and habits, constant stress, emotional reactions, anxiety, like it was not a way to live. If this sounds at all familiar to you, buckle up, I've got you, because it gets better from here. That was like the worst. That was the worst that it had gotten. So there came a turning point. In 2021, I was dating a man at the time, and I was just so fed up. I was so tired of whenever I looked at my bank account, it always being negative or close to negative, and I just felt so exhausted, and I just felt like there was no way out. And so he was doing a company on the side, and I was like, I have no idea what you're doing, but it seems like it's working for you, and I'm just fed up. I'm tired. I need to make extra money. I need to start being serious. And this was, I think I was about 24 or 25. So I had made it a fair distance, just winging it, which I would not recommend. But I started learning. So I actually entered into the finance space, which is funny because it's the opposite of what I knew. But I was blessed that somebody took a chance on me. And I got in the finance space and I started learning about money. I started learning about the rule of 72, compound interest. I started learning about how your money grows and taxes, where your money grows, and different things, and how to budget, you know? And my realization was I didn't understand money at all. Prior to that, in 2019, my car had given out. I was not talking to family at that time. I was in my rebel phase of like, I don't want your help. Don't talk to me. Leave me alone. And so I went to go get a new car, and I didn't know anything about interest rates, and the salesman basically shafted me. And I ended up getting a car for a 24% interest rate. Now, if you don't know cars and money, anytime you're paying on interest, there's a rule called the rule of 72, which I just talked about, which basically means, your money will double, like blah, blah, blah. Essentially, what happened, I don't want to get too mathy in here. I don't want to lose you. But essentially, that meant that the money that my car cost would double against me every 3 years. So I had $8,000, I think, for that car that it was owed. So every 3 years, it would double on top of itself. So in 3 years, I would have had to pay $16,000, and so on and so forth, because it was such a high interest rate. I wasn't even paying off the car. I was barely paying the interest. And so, I finally gave that up. Had to give that up. I reconciled, long story short. I got a different car that didn't have an interest rate. Shout out to my parents. But those were the kind of things I was living in. Those were the kind of financial decisions I was making because I thought that I knew better and I didn't want anybody's help and I was too good for it and all this stuff. Like, looking back now, I'm just like, what were you doing, girl? But neither here nor there. I still wasn't really taking it seriously. So flash forward to 2021 when I joined that financial company. I was in that company for about 2 years, but I still really wasn't taking it seriously for myself. Like, I learned more, but I didn't have the habit of building and keeping money correctly. I wasn't being serious. And so in beginning, or maybe like May of 2023, I was living with a roommate and at the time, and I had money go to the wrong account. Like, it got pulled out and I wasn't able to pay rent. And I ended up getting threatened with eviction. And this was 2 years after I already started in the financial company. How much of an imposter do you think I felt like? Right? How much do I just felt like I didn't know anything. And I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. And so I begged my parents. I was like, hey, I need a loan. And they were like, we can give you a loan, but something has to change because this is not going to work. You're miserable. We're not just going to keep giving you, money. And all the loans I'm paying back to my parents. My parents teach you they teach you the right financial habits, especially when you don't want to listen. I had no choice but to listen. Something had to change. So there was a shift in May of 2023. My parents were like, all right, we'll give you a loan, but you have to start meeting with your dad weekly with your budget. So in order for them to loan me some money to get me off my feet, they said, well, if we're going to loan you this money, we need to see the state of your finances. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do it. I was like, no, thank you. But I didn't really have any choices. I didn't have a lot of choices. And so I was like, you know what? I was worn down enough. I finally was like, fine, we will do that. And it was super uncomfortable at first. It was a huge ego hit. Having to sit there and lay out my finances to my father, it was super uncomfortable. It felt very vulnerable. I felt like, just, oh my God, I just was like, oh, this is so awkward. And we met every single week to go over my budget. He helped me get this app that categorized expenses and made things really easy, and walked me through it. And he had such grace for me during that season. And I have so much love and gratitude toward my father, because I know not everybody gets that. But it was uncomfortable. But it was necessary, because I had gotten to the point where I did not know how to live properly or steward my money, right? For myself to live in any sort of sustainable way. I was tired of building up debt. I had school debt. I had credit card debt. And I just felt overwhelmed. And shout out to my dad for being like, I love you. I want to help you. It's the saying of teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime, right? Rather than just give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And so my dad said, we're going to do this together. We're going to look at your budget. I'm going to teach you how to do this, how to know what's coming in and going out every month. And like I said, it was a big ego hit. I can be a very prideful person sometimes, and so it was hard. I was like, I don't like this. But over time, I gained clarity. I gained clarity about what was coming in and what was coming out, and I gained power over my circumstances. And it started becoming a habit. And not that I looked forward to it, but it wasn't this massively uncomfortable, horrible thing I did. It was more like, going to the dentist or eating your vegetables. It's things that you need to do for your health and well-being that maybe aren't your favorite thing to do. I like vegetables now, but I'm talking about growing up. Whatever. Not important. So the more I looked at money, the less scary it became. The more I looked at my money and my circumstances, the less power it had over me. The more I started to understand my money, the more I started to spend my money wisely. And it was a mindset. It was a mindset shift. So money is not this big, horrible thing. Taking care of money is a skill. Just like any skill, it's learned, right? And it's a muscle, which means that you have to use it over time in order for you to get good at it. You can't just walk into life and be good at money. That's not how it works. If that was the case, there wouldn't be this giant gap between the rich and the poor. Right? And yes, a lot of it is nurture. A lot of it is what you're taught. But at a certain age, I was acting like a hooligan at 24, my parents, they were done at 18. Everything after that, every bad decision after that was my choosing. Right? Regardless of what they did or did not teach me. Okay? Accountability. Thank you. So it was a mindset shift for me. Money no longer is this big, scary thing. It is a skill, and it is a muscle that I have to use, that I have to be confident in over time. And that gives you power. That's empowering, right? That should be empowering. That shouldn't be nerve-wracking for you. That should be empowering. It's a muscle. It's just like going to the gym. We talked about fitness all last month and how to shift that mindset. Take that mindset of discipline and apply it to your money, okay? I wasn't bad. I was just untrained. Stubborn, yeah, but whatever. So what changed? So after that transition, that mindset shift, that was 3 years ago now. And finally, December of 2023, I decided to get a big girl job. And I realized that sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to live happier. You have to sometimes work and do things that maybe you don't necessarily love to do all day, but they pay your bills to free you up to be able to enjoy what you actually want to do. Right? So I went from struggling with my rent, living with somebody, to now, 3 years later, living alone with a savings and a safety net, investing in myself. For example, literally last weekend, my tire light comes on. And I'm like, gotta go check it out. I love Discount Tire. Shameless plug. They're not it's not an advertisement, but I go and I get my tires filled up, and I'm like, maybe it's from the weather change because there was a big storm the night prior. I go and I look at him filling my tires, and like one of them's super low, and I'm like, And he's like, yeah, so there's a screw in your tire. I'm like, oh, okay, that would make sense why my tire light is on. Maybe I'm glad I went and got this checked out. I was like, do I have to get it fixed today, or could I drive it? He's like, I would get it fixed today. And then he was talking about it, and we were going back and forth, and I was asking how much a new pair of tires would be worth because mine are almost done. I've got like a year left. They're cracking, whatever. Long story short, he ended up giving me a quota, or not a quota, sorry. He ended up giving me a quote for the tires, for new tires, because I knew I was going to have to do that eventually. And then he was like, came back a little later, said, hey, I have credits that'll make it less expensive, but it's still going to be like $600 if you want to get all new tires. And I was like, you know what? I can do it, because my dad had taught me that you should be saving and buffering in at least $50 a month for your auto maintenance. Let that grow. So when things like that come up, I was like, it needs to get done. All right, swipe my card. Didn't blink, didn't cry, didn't lose my mind. Just went, oh, I need new tires because I have a car and I want to be safe on the road. Let's do it. Don't worry about fixing the flat. Just run me all new tires. And that was a really empowering moment for me because it was not always like that. And it feels really good to know that I have peace about that. I'm not going to lose my mind or my house, apartment. Okay, it's not a house, but I'm not going to lose my home or my roof because I have to get my tires fixed. If it has to get done, thank the Lord that I have a buffer that I can do that. Like, what a blessing. But that didn't just come out of thin air. That was decisions, that was work, that was building habits. And like, that's just something that I can do now. Now money is intentional. It's not emotional, right? So I am intentional and I plan for these things. And I understand that emergencies will come up. It's not an if, babe, it's a when, right? So I'm no longer emotional about my money. You don't realize how much stress you hold around your finances until it's lifted. And not saying I have zero debt and like everything's fixed. I still have debt to pay off. I'm still paying off a couple loans. I still have things I'm paying off, but the weight of day to day, how am I going to eat? What am I going to make? Am I going to be in the negative? Do I have to hold my breath when I open my bank account? That doesn't exist anymore. I get to live in peace. I get to live with gratitude that I've learned these skills, right? So I want to start putting these things in your mind for yourself, because this isn't about me. I mean, this was my story. I wanted to share because I wanted you to relate to what I'm sharing. If you've ever been in that situation, if you've ever felt like you were never going to get out from under that crushing pile of debt or confusion or, not being taught any of this, which is a whole nother day, and I could get into that, right? But I want you to start small. So how can you take this and apply it to your life? Start small, right? I'm not even going to say budget or like break down your whole monthly. I'm just going to say start noticing what comes in and what goes out. Just start being aware of it. And here's something that you can apply to your life today if you want. There's a simple order with which you should be using your money. So, you get your paycheck, and then you're going to pay your bills. So, everything that keeps the light on, right? Keeps me in a house, keeps my car insured, right? All the other really important bills that, groceries, right? Setting aside for groceries. Pay your bills. And then I need to get better at this second one. I have a savings, but I need to get better at building it. Save something. Even if it's $5. Get a savings account, high yield if you want to. Get something that's earning interest. If you need, because you're going to pull from it, put it in a separate bank. One that you can only pull out of a certain number of times. Save something. Make it a habit. Even if it's $5, heck, even if it's $1. I mean, shoot for 50, shoot for 100. I don't know where you're starting though, so I'm not gonna. And then whatever you spend afterward, whether it's like a massage or a nice dinner out or an experience, you won't have that stress because you've already covered everything. I've covered my bills and I'm saving. I'm taking care of that emergency fund, babe. Right? Emergency funds are sexy. Thank you. Saving is attractive. I'm just saying, okay? So the simple order, pay your bills, save something, and then spend the rest. Or, you don't have to spend anything, but I like nice things sometimes, so, right? So the truth is, most people do the opposite. Most people spend first and then stress later, right? So if you can just make that simple switch, then you will find that your life is getting a lot easier. It's a lot easier for you to breathe. Like, you deserve to have peace about your money. You deserve to have clarity about your money, right? So, in closing, if you feel behind, take a breath, right? It's never too late to start, ever. You're not behind. You just weren't taught. That's where I was, even if people were trying to teach me. Sorry, Mom and Dad. And you can change your situation. I want to encourage you today. You can change your situation for the better, right? As somebody who, I think about May 2023 Joy often. I think about her and her mindset. I wasn't really in a good place mentally, romantically, emotionally, financially, obviously. And to think that I just had my third Easter in this apartment alone, I'm blown away by the blessings that God has given me. And no, it didn't just get handed to me on a platter. I had to humble myself. I had to get real with myself, and I had to be honest with somebody else and vulnerable about my needs and like where I fell short in my money. But it's changed my life. And I can honestly say I have so much peace around my money. Now, do I want to grow more? Do I want to, am I working on building bigger income and being able to do other things? Of course, like, we're never finished, right? But I'm not drowning anymore. I've reached land. I'm standing on solid ground. And now I'm trying to build upward. So if you're drowning and you feel stressed, I just want you to know you're not alone. And I'm here to help. I have a lot of knowledge about finance. And I'd love to share it because I feel like it's really important to share and it's really empowering. Okay? It is empowering. So, we're going to, in the next couple weeks, focus on a couple things. We're going to focus on your foundation, right? Building a foundation in your money. And I'm going to touch on tithing a little bit if you're faith-centered, because I believe that opens you up to a lot of blessing. And then we're going to go into budgeting and growing your money in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. We've got some really, really interesting information-packed episodes in the next couple episodes. I can't speak today. I'm trying. But final thought, just start paying attention. Get your head out of your sand, okay? Get your head in your bank account and start noticing what's going on. Getting uncomfortable, that discomfort of getting uncomfortable and starting is worth it. It's worth it in the long run. It's worth it because what it brings is your peace. And what it brings is clarity and calmness, right? So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a really, really rich episode. I didn't mean for that to be cheesy, but there you go. I look forward to all of you guys joining me on this next episode next week. Stay tuned, and I will see you guys next time. Oh, I'm so glad that we get to do this life and live joyfully, and I am so grateful we get to do it together. Now, I'll see you next time.